Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, I'm Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. When I was in college, I was very shy. It's hard to believe it right now, but for almost a year or so, I wouldn't speak to any of the girls. I just kept to myself. But what I did was draw cartoons. And what I realized was, unlike all of the other guys who went chasing after the girls, I just had to sit in one corner of the canteen, and the girls would crowd around and ask me questions or want to see the cartoons. I didn't have to go to them, they came to me. And it wasn't planned or pre-programmed, it just happened. It happened because there was this factor of curiosity. And it's this very same curiosity that we have to create every time we go out and we speak to someone. When someone asks us, "What do you do?" they're essentially asking you, make me curious, get me interested in what you do so that we can have a conversation. And we call that an elevator speech. In today's episode, we're going to look at an elevator speech. What makes an elevator speech so interesting? How do you create it? We'll look at some examples. And by the end of this, you should know how to create your own elevator speech, or at least get started. Here comes the elevator. Bing. Now, if you're in a real elevator, you'll notice that no one asks you questions. If anything, people don't tend to make eye contact at all. Hence, why would anyone want to know what you do? And why is the elevator speech so important? We all want to know the answer to the second question. Why is it important? And the elevator speech is important because elevators are quick. You could get from the basement to the 66th floor at breathtaking speed, which means that you don't have time. And we're all aware that time is the main constraint. So in this segment, we're going to look at 3 points, like always. Why the elevator speech needs to be short, it needs to be single-focused, and, like we talked about earlier, it needs to be curious. Let's start out with a few examples. The question, what do you do? And the answer is, I show people how to get rid of their lower back pain with a 3-minute exercise. Or a second example, what do you do? Dogs that bark incessantly are a problem for owners as well as the neighborhood. I show you the root causes of barking and how to get your dog relaxed. And a third example, what do you do? Professional wedding photographers shoot hundreds, even thousands of photos at a single event. Each of the pictures is huge, often 50 megabytes in size. And a computer takes ages to display every picture. We have a software that shows you the picture in a fraction of a second, allowing you to pick the ones that you need instantly. When you have this conversation with someone in an elevator, not every answer qualifies you as a client. At some point in time, you might have lower back pain, and yes, that first person is interesting. You might not have a dog, you might not have dogs in your neighborhood, doesn't matter. You might not take more than 2 pictures every week. So the software that processes thousands of pictures, and especially high-res pictures, is not of any value to you. However, it still becomes interesting. It still becomes interesting just from a curiosity point of view. You might still want to know, what is it that makes dogs stop barking? You might be curious about that software that processes thousands of pictures, because somewhere on your computer you have thousands of pictures, even if they're not high resolution. which goes to show that curiosity plays its role, and it opens up the conversation with the other person, even if you're not directly interested in that product or service. And the reason why we do this is because we're always filing away information, both for ourselves and for others. Which is to say that if someone tells you about a different kind of sofa or a pen that works differently, we're going to file that away, partly for our curiosity, but also because we don't know when we will need something like that. Hence, when we are constructing an elevator speech, curiosity becomes the crucial factor. It becomes the core of how other people respond to whatever we've said. But there are those 3 parameters that we brought up. You remember them, don't you? Okay, let's do it again. Let's start out with the first one. The first one is short. But why short? Because long sentences are hard to remember. So if you can't summarize what you do in 1, 2, maybe 3 sentences, you have way too much information. A lot of that information has to be stored away. When someone says, "What do you do?" they're paying attention to what you say, they're being curious, but they're storing away that information. And the more points you put in that information, the more confusing it is for them to remember it, and it's even harder for them to relate it to somebody else. To take the example of that software, Photo Mechanic, which is what I use with my photographs, what does Photo Mechanic do really well? What it does is it processes 50 megabyte files in 1 second. You can see it click, 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 click. You can see it that way. Now, what I did there was added information with all that click, click, click. And that's not crucial. What's crucial is to get the point across, which is when you shoot high-res files, they take between 10 to 12 seconds to load. Photo Mechanic shows you that file in a single second. You see that? It was just a line or 2, and you remember it. The first point with elevator speeches is that you have to make sure that it's as short as possible while getting the point across. The second point is that it needs to be single-focused. Every single one of our products or services can do many things. They can do this and that and that and that. And usually that's what we do. We try to get all the points across, or at least a few of the points across, because we feel that it makes more of an impact on the person listening to it. Maybe you meet the person that solves the problem of barking dogs, and you say, "What do you do?" And they say, "Dogs often bark, irritating the owner and often the neighborhood. What I do is I solve the problem of barking dogs, but I also help them increase their appetite, and I blah, blah, blah." When something is not single-focused, what you'll have is an "and" in between, which is I do this, and I do that, and I do that. That kind of statement isn't single-focused. We think that by giving more information, it's going to be more interesting, but it gets confusing. It gets watered down. It's hard to pass it on. So, first point, it needs to be short. 1, 2, maybe 3 sentences. Second point, it needs to have a single focus. You need to remove all the ands from it. If you see "and" coming in, that's when you know you have a problem. Which takes us to the third factor. That's curiosity. What is it that makes that statement curious? Usually, it's a combination of a known problem and the corresponding solution. The dog barks, the barking stops. The lower pain starts. A 3-minute exercise banishes the pain. No matter where you look, the most curious statements have an almost identical trigger. They have a problem and they have a solution. And when you put that problem and the solution in a short, single-focused manner, it will almost always get the attention of the listener. problem, solution, problem, solution, problem, solution. That's how it works. But can we make it even more curious? Can we enhance that elevator speech? Of course we can. But for that, we have to make some sacrifices. We could refer to the software, Photomechanic, as a photography software, or we could position it for wedding photographers. We could talk about dogs barking, or we could talk about very small dogs barking. We could talk about lower back pain for everyone, or we could talk about lower back pain for software programmers. And immediately there's a sense of regret that somehow I am missing out on the audience, that vast audience, all of whom have lower back pain or dogs or need to take a lot of pictures. We feel that we are missing out because, of course, it solves all of their problems. And this is the beauty of how we position something. We think that if we position it for a smaller audience, then only the smaller audience is going to participate in that, and everybody else is going to be left out, and that's bad for us. First of all, there is no such thing as a small audience. There are tens of thousands of software programmers. There are tens of thousands of people with small dogs, and the same thing with wedding photographers. So already their market is substantial. But even if that market were really tiny, it's not like the rest of the world doesn't say, hey, wait, that could work for me. So I don't shoot wedding photographs and probably never will, but I understand that it takes a lot of time for that image to load, and so Photomechanic makes sense to me. And that's the way the client or the person listening to it, they take away the core of the message. What is the problem? What is the solution? And then they go, okay, I guess this could work for me as well. When we put that target audience in between, we narrow down everything, but we also make it more curious. If you've ever wondered, how do you create an elevator speech that gets attention, then you have to depend largely on curiosity. You have to get the other person to engage, to say, how do you do that? What do you mean by that? To keep that conversation going without you pushing more information out there. And to do that, we have to focus on those 3 points. First, we have to make sure that it's short, 1, 2, or 3 lines. The second thing is you have to make sure that it is single-focused and there are no and, because that's watering it down. Finally, if we have a problem and a solution, you've already created curiosity. But if you insert a target audience, you're going to create a heightened level of curiosity. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. What's the one thing that you can do today? If you have an elevator speech, go looking for the and. How many times do you say and in your elevator speech? Be ruthless, cut out the ands, because that's where most of the problem lies. Once you do that, it becomes single-focused, which is precisely what we want. It's memorable. Single focus is always memorable. With that, let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. The first and the biggest thing that's happening this year is the copywriting course or the sales page course or the landing page course. And why I use all of these phrases? Because that's what the internet has done to us. Essentially, you have a product, you have a service, you want to sell it, and you have to create a sales page. To write that sales page, you had to be a copywriter, but you don't have to be a copywriter anymore, because this course will help you put together the elements of a sales page in under 3 days. Now, the course doesn't last 3 days, it lasts 3 months, because we're going to do it bit by bit so that you get very good at it. But then when you go out to write any sales page for any of your products, or maybe for a client, you're going to be able to do it in 3 days. Now, bear in mind that most copywriters take 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So this is kind of special that you're able to do it in under 3 days. The last time we did this course was almost 10 years ago, and it was one of our best-selling courses, sold out in 20 minutes. So if you'd like to be part of the copywriting course, the seats will be available on the 27th of Feb. And as you know, at Psychotactics, we have a very limited number of seats. If you're in 5000 BC as a member, then you have priority. And then after that, we go to those on the waiting list. So you have to be on the waiting list to get the notification so that you can sign up for the course. And how do you remember where to go? Well, it's quite simple. You go to psychotactics.com/landing pages. And there you'll find the waiting list. But you'll also get a whole bunch of goodies about copywriting, about writing sales pages. So there's really no downside there. That's psychotactics.com/landing pages. Make a note of it so that you can go there. I'll be single focused about this announcement. I'll say bye for now, and we'll see you in 5000 BC. Bye-bye. Still listening? One of the things that is very crucial when you're creating that elevator speech is something that a lot of people don't do. They create an elevator speech and then they are very proud of it and they go, listen to my elevator speech. You don't really want to do that. You want to test it. When I created an elevator speech way back in 2000, I would go to a networking meeting and I would test it because the first time that I said something, I didn't get the response that I wanted. Someone asked me, what do you do? And I said, we reactivate dormant business clients. And they weren't interested in dormant business clients. They weren't interested in anything but new clients. And so you've got to understand approximately what your client wants. And the only way you'll know if they want what you're selling is when they ask you more questions. They will start to ask you a whole bunch of questions, and that's how you know that you're getting through. And that's how you kind of also refine your elevator speech, because as you're explaining those things to them, you hear yourself speaking. And when you hear yourself speaking, you realize, hey, wait, I can take this piece and put it there, and that piece and put it there. And I had to change my elevator speech because it wasn't going anywhere. It was perfect. It had a problem. It had a solution, but it wasn't getting me clients. And that's how we got to the point, which is why clients buy and why they don't. And as you know, that has got us clients for the past 20 years. That led to the brain audit. And that's led us to the situation that we find ourselves in, which is very comfortable. So test that elevator speech and make sure that people start to ask you questions. And that's how you know it's working. It's 6:08 a.m. It's almost time for a walk. I'll see you in 5000 BC. Bye for now.